Well, it's a great day today because the Democrats got their asses kicked in Virginia. That and other stories about the election, we're going to be covering them all today. Plus, I have a doctor from Yale who's going to tell you about the dangers of having your kid jabbed. Now that Pfizer, the vaccine from Pfizer, you know, that stock company, that stock keeps on going up. Yeah, you could jab your kid now, says the FDA, the CDC, and every other last moron in Washington, D.C. Plus, my favorite video of the whole year from Kamala Harris. Today's going to be a great show. You better get ready.
Why aren't the people in Washington putting themselves in harm's way? Why aren't they walking the walk as well as talking the talk? Their position in Washington is to do the will of the people. I don't see anybody in Washington doing the will of the people anymore. The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I am DML, and you are listening to the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast. The exclusive sponsor of this program is DMLCBD.com. Go there today and get the best CBD products that can make you feel great again. This podcast is for independent thinkers who want to recapture the great American experience, and they know it all starts with sharing the unfiltered facts, truth, and opinions I give you every day. Today's podcast will both shine a light on the solutions that can fix our nation's biggest problems, and it will make you the smartest person in the room. Here we go.
A couple of years ago, for those of you who have been with me for a while, you'll remember this. A couple of years ago, I came on the program and I said I was so tired of doing this program because all it was bad news. Bad news, day in and day out. I remember telling my wife that, I wanted to throw in the towel. She said, well, why don't you do something positive? Try to do something positive. So I racked my brain and I took my two oldest kids, we grabbed our cameras and we went around the country and we did this thing called America the Beautiful. And we created a little series for people who are on teamdml.com. And now we've now started to put it up on the app. In fact, the DML News app right now, as of today, has episode 1 of 6 episodes for America the Beautiful. And later today, I'll put up episode 2. So you may want to check that out. You can get the DML News app for free from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for iPhone and iPad. So with that being said, I did that. And of course, after that was finished, I went right back into the bad news because bad news, well, basically, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the saying in my business. It is rare that I ever get to announce something that's good. Today is one of those rare days where I actually get to come to you with just really great news. Promise for tomorrow, because everything for the past year, pretty much since the election, has been gloom and doom. We haven't trusted our elections. We still believe that Donald J. Trump really won. And whether or not we are just conspiracy theorists or whether or not we really know the truth and they keep on burying it from us, doesn't matter. What matters most today is that we don't have Donald J. Trump. We have Joe Biden. And over the past 10 months that he has been president, he has literally taken the bricks out of the foundation of this country, not with just one bad policy, but with many different bad policies and with messaging that is just so evil and anti-American that it is impossible for me to give you 5 minutes of commentary and nail it all. People don't like the direction of this country. This includes independents and reasonable Democrats like West Virginia's Joe Manchin. With that said, today's program is going to be split in two. For the first half, we are just going to have a lot of fun here. We are going to celebrate one of those rare days where we get to say, hey, this is just a great day. And the second part is I'm going to have a really smart doctor from Yale on here explaining the dangers of getting a child vaccinated now that as of yesterday, I believe it is the Pfizer vaccine is now available for 5-year-olds to 11-year-olds. It is getting uber dangerous. There's no reason for these kids to be taking the jab. They keep on pushing it into our arms, and the Democrats don't understand this. Maybe today they understand after getting their asses whipped last night in Virginia. We're going to start off right now with a short blurb here from the new governor of Virginia.
There is is no time to waste. Our kids can't wait. We work in real people time, not government time.
Glenn Youngkin threw a shellacking on Terry McAuliffe last night. Now, keep in mind that Terry McAuliffe pulled out every single last idiot in the progressive Democrat Socialist Party. Obama took the stage. Kamala took the stage. A lot of us. Biden, also known as Joe Magoo, took the stage. They threw out all the heavy hitters, and he still got his ass whipped. He got crushed. And as of right now, the taping of this show over in New Jersey, Mr. Murphy, who was supposed to be a runaway in New Jersey, he is hanging on by a string. There's 1,200 votes that basically separate him from staying in the governor's office to being removed from the governor's office. And you know what? He's another radical Democrat. So what's happening here? Because let me also tell you two other things. We wound up seeing that in Minnesota, the people of Minnesota said no to defunding the police, to replacing the police department with a bunch of people who are going to walk around with canes and say, hey, don't do that again, or else I'm going to say, don't do that again. People are tired of Joe Biden. They're tired of the radical Democrats. They're tired of everything that I talked about yesterday. The opening program yesterday said to you from this guy right here, are you tired yet? Are you tired yet? It's 10 months. Are you tired yet? And people came out in droves and said, yeah, we're really, really tired. Play the next video because this video is the best description of what took place last night. This is from Fox News.
I think this is a wake-up call for Democrats all over the country. And in fact, Kamala Harris said that very thing. But this is not an accident. This victory is the result of the hard preparation and groundwork by lawyers like Jill, by the Republican National Lawyers Association, which trained and deployed almost 100 lawyers into the field, and by the RNC, which invested heavily in over 100 staff. So this is not just sort of the glamour of personality and flashy, results like that. It is about the hard work in the trenches. Scott Pressler making sure to register voters. That's how you do it. You don't do it with personality. You do it with latching on to the policies that move middle America, move the soccer moms, and that's the kids, and that's the schools, and that's the taxes, and that's people paying $100 to fill up their cars. Those are the things that won this election. That's right. Right there, it nailed it. Right there, it nailed it. And you know what? You got to wonder why the lawyers weren't out in full steam 12 months ago. But you know what? No sense looking back. Let's keep the happy meals coming in today, because today's a great day. In fact, the last video I'm going to play before we bring on the doctor is my favorite video of the year. But we'll save that. So I want to give you a lot of fun. I want to give you a smile on your face. I want to play a series of videos here that are just so much fun because the Democrats are melting down in each single one of them. These Democrats on MSNBC and on CNN, who every single day tout how great Joe Biden is, how great Kamala Harris is, how dangerous it is out there with COVID-19, and that there is no critical race theory, and Black Lives Matter. We have been pounded with this crap, and now they're all crying. It is so much fun to watch these hypocrites, these 2-cent journalists, melt in their own host seat. So we're going to pull up the first one here. This is from Van Jones, a communist named Van Jones. Listen to what Van, who, by the way, before we play the clip, Van Jones compared Glenn Youngkin to a Delta variant. That's how, the fact that they've got this race-baiting piece of crap on CNN tells you how low that network goes. Play the communist.
I think that the Democrats are coming across in ways that we don't recognize, that are annoying and offensive and seem out of touch in ways that I don't think show up in our feeds when we're looking at our kind of echo chamber.
That's right. They don't show up in your feed. You want to know why they don't show up in your feeds? Because what the Facebooks and the Googles do is they suppress the real Democrats. They suppress it, and they try to make it sound like the Republicans are all evil and Donald Trump is the devil with crazy hair. That's what they do. But ultimately, we, the people who get out there and live every single day, Van Jones, we don't got. Jeff Bezos doesn't go giving me $100 million to my charity like he did to you, okay? You live in la la land. You live in we got to check the box. He's a black guy. Let's give him some extra TV time. Let's give him some extra money. No, the rest of us are out there working our asses off, trying to take care of our children, trying to take care of our lives, trying to take care of our businesses, keep our jobs, trying to figure out how it is we're going to come up with $1,700 this month for our health insurance after we just had to fill up the tank for $100. We got inflation running insane. You can't wind up my wife is ordering Christmas gifts 2 weeks ago. I said, why are you starting this crap already? Because do you see the ships out in the Pacific? Nobody could get anything. I went to a boat show this weekend. I went to the boat show. My daughter and I, we walked out. Yesterday, I just talked to my mechanic who also was at the boat show. And I said, was there like a lack of inventory? He's like, there was nothing there. I said, you see the prices? He says, yeah, a boat that was going for $100,000 last year is going $300,000 now. He goes, and you can't even buy a used boat. People are struggling. This wasn't like this 10 months ago, 12 months ago under Trump. Trump may have been a little out there with some of the tweets. He may have been a little combative because he just doesn't take the BS from people like Van Jones. But the country was humming. Now the country is choking on its own saliva. We don't recognize these Democrats. They're coming off as, I'll tell you what they're coming off as, stupid idiots, socialists who have no place in American society. Play the next video.
And that feeling that Americans have of fear, stress, anxiety, frustration, about all sorts of issues, right? And they might not have the same kind of anxiety about the same issue, but there is this feeling of dread, of discontent, of a country that's sort of stalled out and not delivering in the way that Biden promised, that Democrats have promised as well in this last election.
Where was this 2-bit analyst a week ago? What all of a sudden, they're feeling the fear and the disconnect and not feeling great about where things are going. Where was that woman a week ago? Where was that woman 4 weeks ago? Where was she 3 months ago? I'll tell you what she was doing. She was kissing ass to Anthony Fauci, telling you how dangerous it was and that you're going to die and your kid's going to die from COVID. David Axelrod. Oh, we got 2 videos from David Axelrod. This was Obama's little boy. He was Obama's playboy.
The Democratic Party, what you've seen is it's become a more college-educated urban party in coalition with minority voters, and the messages tend to be moralizing. It's like we are going to tell you, we will tell you what is right. We and no connection to people who work with their hands, people who work with their backs, rural voters. So that's part of the problem.
Listen to that condescending asshole. So first of all, the Democrats are more of an educated party, the college party, and we are, more urban. And of course, we've mixed in a couple of those token minorities. And, we're really coming off as condescending. We're not reaching out and understanding the people who work with their hands. So in other words, what he's doing is he's trying to make it sound like Republicans are dumbasses who have to work in the fields, who have to work on the greasy engines every day, who don't have college diplomas, who could barely make it, and we're not reaching out to them. Us smart little college whippersnappers who, have a couple of token black guys next to us. No, that's not the way it works. You understand? That's not the way it works. You stupid morons on the left. I don't care if you got a college diploma, a PhD, or you wound up gotten, you dropped out of high school in 9th grade. I don't care if you're black, white, pink, or purple. At the end of the day, Democrats stand for stupid. They have policies that are stupid. We're going to talk to a doctor in 20 minutes from now who's going to say, he's going to ask you a question. Why are we jabbing kids? Why are we mandating we jab kids with a vaccine that was made a year and a half ago for a variant that's not even around? That's a Democrat idea. That's an Anthony Fauci, liberal pushing, Bill Gates, over the top Democrat idea. Don't make it like you're so freaking educated. Get the next one up. Play the next one.
If you're a Democrat sitting on Capitol Hill and you're from one of these swing districts in suburban areas, are you rethinking tonight your vote on this reconciliation package? Are you thinking maybe it's best we shouldn't do it? If I were sitting in the White House, if I were sitting in the leadership of in the Democratic councils in the Congress, I'd be worried about that. I'd be trying to firm these people up.
That's the story right there. That right there's that. Why these people are always chasing. They're always chasing a poll. They're always chasing what winds up happening after it happens. Why does it take you getting your ass whipped in Virginia to realize the fact that everything you're doing is wrong? Are you that dumb that you can't recognize that trying to spend $3.5 trillion giving amnesty, telling the IRS to go in and do peekaboo on anybody with $600 or more in their savings account? You can't tell that this is asinine? You can't tell the fact that we got the president over there right now at the climate, the fake climate summit falling asleep? You can't see that these things are detrimental until after you get your ass whipped? My God. Jake Tapper is one of the biggest idiots on television. But even Jake the fake news, he understands. He understands that something's happening. Play the video.
Let's talk about this with our panel, because whether it's the policing reform or the socialist candidate for mayor of Buffalo, trailing, at least as of right now, to the write-in candidate, the incumbent Democratic mayor, the very, very close race in New Jersey, the not-so-close race in Virginia, we are seeing something going on here, a trend that seems clearly a message clearly at the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And there are Democrats who are from areas that are not liberal, that are not progressive, that are, in Washington, we call them frontliners, Democrats who are in swing districts looking ahead to 1 year from now, who I'm texting that some of them are very concerned about what this means.
Well, very concerned about what this means. Why is it that they didn't understand prior to this? Why didn't they understand? People don't want to get vaccine mandates. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be waiting on lines at airports and having American Airlines and Southwest cancel things. They don't want their children wearing frickin' masks. This agenda from this president is asinine. They need police. We need police because there's a lot of criminals out there. What part of the Democrat policy doesn't the media understand until after they lose? Yeah, this is sending a big message. Why? See, they never look at things on paper as they are. It's always a reaction. It's never somebody getting in front of a problem and really looking. See, that was the one thing about Trump that you had to give him credit. He understood the problems, and he understood that a lot of the problems that we had could be fixed with nothing more or less than common sense. Trump may have not have been the smartest guy in the room, but he had a lot of common sense, and he understood this doesn't make sense. Teaching kids in school that white people today are, the new slave owners today, that's not common sense. That's asinine. That is socialism, crazyism. That is just has no place anywhere in society. You got parents who would never even think about going to a school board, lining up for school boards to talk, to say, hey, what is going on with you here? This doesn't make any sense. Why are you telling my kid, a white kid, that his friend next to him, a black kid, is his slave? Why are you teaching my kid about anal sex in school? Why are you teaching my kid all this crazy nonsense instead of teaching him math and science? Why aren't you doing it? And now today the Democrats, I guess they don't want us teaching about black, society and how it is that we're all slaves. The next 3 minutes is a culmination of Democrat meltdown. Just sit back, enjoy your drink, and just listen to these morons who have been given a microphone speak about what happened last night.
I watched Glenn Youngkin's interviews on Fox News, and he did nothing that he did not I mean, he worshipped at the altar of Donald Trump on Fox News. He flew an insurrection flag at his rallies. He simply didn't. He played dumb about a Zoom rally. He did not really put much distance between himself and Donald Trump on the big lie or the deadly insurrection in which police officers were maimed by flagpoles. So I think that the real ominous thing is that critical race theory, which isn't real, turned the suburbs 15 points to the Trump insurrection-endorsed Republican.
Critical race theory was a lie. And I think we need to go on the offense a little bit. And Terry McAuliffe tried to do this. Say it's a lie. They know it's a lie. But are you scared for your kids to learn about slavery or lynching or housing discrimination? Are we raising kids to be that weak? Like, I think sometimes we answer with facts and we don't believe people will believe these things. But they're not going to campaign on the level, Nicole. They are going to lie. They will say anything. If this is a boxing match, they're bringing heavier gloves and knives in their boots.
Trump approved Republican Glenn Youngkin's closing message to Virginia voters has almost singularly focused on weaponizing race, stoking hysteria over the coded boogeyman of critical race theory, which is not currently taught in any Virginia public school. From banning Toni Morrison's Beloved, this epic novel, a Pulitzer Prize-winning seminal work of American fiction that recounts the horrors of slavery, to casting himself as the candidate of so-called parents' rights, vowing to ban critical race theory, which again is not taught if elected. Again, it's not taught in any Virginia public schools.
Critical race theory, Joy, is just the most recent, more eloquent iteration of the Southern strategy, right? Whether it be crosstown busing, whether it be the welfare queen, whether it be defund the police. This original sin of America keeps evolving, and critical race theory is the most latest and most eloquent, quite frankly, iteration of the Southern strategy, in a way, quite frankly, to tribalize an election, to tribalize an electorate in a way to drive up the white vote.
You may have the same view I have of critical race theory, which is it was a phony issue. It certainly is in Virginia, where it isn't taught. But people believe what they want to believe. You know, we're still in the Trump era, right? You don't have to have the facts backing you up. If people want to believe what you say, they will believe it.
That's right. Critical race theory isn't taught. It means something different to voters. They think it is. So Republicans are fixing it. Youngkin's going to ban it. And some of it is just a question for Democrats now. Do you adjust to a terrain that is not fair, that is not just, that is all fact-based, but that at this tonight looks like it advantages Republicans?
Well, the problem that part of the Obama coalition, unfortunately, there are a lot of Americans who don't want to deal with the history. They don't want to deal with it. And they might have voted for Obama, but they're in that coalition too. But when confronted with the opportunity to say, who really was Thomas Jefferson? They don't want to. And the exit polls showed that which was interesting, that the coronavirus, or that the virus, it was a very
low
was not importance to many of the voters
which
there.
Was fascinating.
It was education, which is code for white parents don't like the idea of teaching about race. And I mean, unfortunately, race is just the most palpable tool in the toolkit. It used to be of the Democratic Party back in the day when there were Dixiecrats, and now of the Republican Party. It just is powerful.
It's nonstop. It's nonstop. So see, that's what you do when you don't have an argument. I'll give you an example. So I can be out there and I could give you the 15 reasons why illegal immigration is detrimental to the success of the United States. I could talk about the impact it has on education, about how it is that we are taking school resources, which basically comes from your property tax if you're a public school. And, hey, listen, we're paying teachers 25% more to teach non-English speaking kids how to speak English than we are teaching our normal everyday citizen child. And I say normal in the sense that we know who they are, we know where they came from, we know what shots they have and don't have. It costs 25% more to educate a kid who's not even supposed to be in this country. We're killing our budget on kids who shouldn't be here. They want to call me a racist for that because they can't argue the stats. They can't argue the numbers. They can't argue the fact that my child who I'm paying for to go to school through my taxes isn't getting the education he or she should be getting because we're focusing more on children who shouldn't be here and their parents aren't paying into the system. They can't make the argument back against me. So what do? They call me a racist. If you turn around and say anything about, hey, listen, there's shootings in South Chicago. Blacks are killing blacks at an unbelievable rate. Why is that happening? I think it's because the black dads don't stick around. Automatically, I'm a racist. I'm a racist. I am not going to sit here and allow the Democrats to take away statistics that are what they are and just call me a racist every single time. So I push back, and then it becomes this ugly battle back and forth. And what the left does, because out of the 15 things that I talk about, whether it's illegal immigration or whether it's black crime or whether it's about drugs coming over the border, in every single response, there is going to be racist inserted, because automatically they have everybody else except for Dennis Michael Lynch back on their heels. Hey, whoa, I'm not a racist. And you change the narrative from talking about the cost of giving birth to an illegal alien, or why it is that blacks are dying at a disproportionate rate from homicide than any other demographic, or why it is that my child isn't getting the education that they should. They change that to talk about race because I'm going to go on my heels. Or I should say the average person will go on their heels. It's very effective. Here's where the ball is not rolling anymore for the Democrats. Finally, the majority of Virginians, and I think the majority of Americans, are starting to recognize what I recognized long ago. Because when I first got into immigration, when I first got into the news, all of a sudden I started getting tagged as a racist. I'm like, whoa, how did that happen? And I started doing things like, wait, the first guy I ever hired in my computer company was a black guy named Sarge from, he was from Tobago or wherever the hell he was from. I can't remember where he's from. And, one of my best friends was Puerto Rican. I got into that because I fell for I have to prove that I'm not a racist because they said I am. They tagged me. And then you recognize that that's not the way you fight the fight. You fight the fire with the fire. You come back and you give them an extra statement that they could try to call you racist for because you keep on hitting them with facts. Finally, people are recognizing that's not going to work anymore. You're not going to call me a racist anymore. You could deny that CRT is in schools. It may not be CRT 101, but it is snuck in there at every single level. That's why I told you yesterday, there was a father who's a Democrat, long-term, long-voting Democrat, Biden, Hillary, Obama. And then finally, because the Democrats threw everybody into their homes in lockdown situations, especially in radical states like Virginia, that father is working from home and listening to what's being taught over Zoom. And he's hearing about slavery and how today there's still slavery going on. Today's white person is the modern day slave owner. Now, a couple times there in that whole messaging campaign that we just put together for you, all the crazy Democrats, what? Are our children that weak that they can't learn about slavery? See, this is how disconnected these people are. In social studies, in American history, you weren't going to touch slavery. I remember when I was in school, we touched slavery. You were taught about everything slavery. You did the lesson for about 2 weeks, and then you moved on to the next lesson. And eventually, you learned about how JFK was shot in the head. You learn about what U.S. history is. Nobody's saying let's eradicate the chapters of the books that talk about slavery. What we're saying is let's not make slavery and race why we're sending our children to school. We've got 7 periods today, all about race and slavery and race and inequality and race and defunding the cops. And for the last 15 minutes today, we're going to do some math. That's what it's basically come down to. And the Democrats want to make it sound like we're pushing out more fake news. Last election, it was the Russians. This election now, it's fake news about there really is no CRT. Okay. I want to play another clip here. This is from CBS. And I want you to listen to this entire thing. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you what they didn't touch.
So let's go through some of those clues with our Major Garrett, chief Washington correspondent. Starting in the state of New Jersey, much closer than people expected, Governor Phil Murphy in a narrow race with Chitterelli. And if you compare it to 2017, you can see just how big of a change there's been. Look at that erosion.
Exactly. What did I say just 24 hours ago on this very set? Keep your eyes on New Jersey. It felt like that race was tightening in ways that pollsters didn't anticipate and neither campaign anticipated. What was driving that? There's some fatigue with the Biden economic agenda. There were economic issues related to taxes in New Jersey and education. And it looks to me, Tony, that in a post-Trump or neo-post-Trump era, if you have center-right agenda and President Trump is not part of the conversation, suburbans voters are gettable for Republicans.
Let's take a walk south to the state of Virginia, another big one people are watching. Now, there's a lot we could say about the state of Virginia, but I want to focus in on the Hampton Roads region of the state. 1.8 million people live in this region right here. And Terry McAuliffe underperformed compared to 2017 with Ralph Northam. He barely won Suffolk County. He lost Chesapeake County, and he lost Virginia Beach. If you compare that to 2017, wow, the Democrat dominated in those three counties just 4 years ago.
Exactly. And that trend that you saw there is basically also what you see in Northern Virginia. In 2020, President Trump lost the suburbs of Virginia, Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, by 8 points. Glenn Youngkin won them by 6. That's a 14-point swing in one calendar year. Again, reinforcing what I just said about New Jersey. If Trump is not part of the equation, and it's a center-right agenda when you talk about education, the economy, and what's going on with Biden and Democrats in the Congress, those suburban voters are approachable and gettable if you're a Republican not named Donald Trump.
Let's get into some of the demographics here. Youngkin wins among voters for whom the top issue is the economy. He also wins among voters for whom the top issue is education. And take a look at this. President Biden underwater among voters who went with Youngkin. No surprise there. What do those three slides tell you?
So disapproval of President Biden, that was a drag on Terry McAuliffe, generally. Economy, that's a traditional Republican issue, but it's defined right now by inflation in a general sense. Maybe the Biden agenda is too progressive, or maybe it's spending too much. That was certainly on the minds. And education, traditionally a Democratic issue, but Republicans moved it in their direction by talking about parents not being heard sufficiently by school boards, and that idea that parents are being disempowered was energizing in many of these key suburban districts throughout the state.
If there's one data point that I think sums up this race for people, it's this next slide, so I want you to comment on it. This is independents in the state of Virginia. In 2020, you can see they came out for the Democrat. That was Joe Biden. In 2021, in the governor's race, complete shift.
Exactly. President Trump will say that his base turned out, and that's why Glenn Youngkin won. Well, that base is important. But when you take Donald Trump out of it, independent voters who do shift and look at these other core issues are up for grabs. And that shift, reflected in the suburbs and other parts of the state, is exactly what happened for Glenn Youngkin. He did not run by embracing former President Trump. He said, I'm my own man. So the Trump base plus these gettable independents was his path to victory.
Throughout that whole presentation, although I agree with many parts of it, never once did they talk about COVID. Did you notice that? In fact, the only time that you heard COVID in all those clips that I played for you was Joy Reid said, and COVID wasn't a big thing. Nobody talked about COVID at all. And therefore, you should be looking at COVID big and tall, because the Democrats want to keep COVID out of the conversation. Yesterday, it was announced that now you can jab a 5 to 11-year-old with the Pfizer vaccine. In LA, your kid can't go to school unless they got a vax. You know, the COVID mess is a huge reason why the Democrats are going to wind up losing the races as they were yesterday, and a big reason why they're going to lose what's going to be taking place next year. Well, think about what we have right now. The economy. The reason why those boats are stuck out in the Pacific has everything to do with COVID. Everything to do with COVID. Americans are tired of hearing Anthony Falchi change his mind, change the goalposts every single day. People are tired of having to wear a mask. People are tired of being told that you need to have a vaccination card in order to be able to get into a restaurant. It's crazy. It's controlling. It's communism. You could take the CRT. You really, look, What's happening in our schools is problematic. I will be the first one to say it. Our kids are failing to keep in pace with the other industrialized nations. I read these statistics to you all the time. When it comes to math, we're not even close to being in the top 10. When it comes to science, when it comes to reading and writing, our children are failing. And a big part of this is because we're not teaching them this kind of stuff in school anymore like we used to. We just had a whole program the other day where I was talking about how Japanese exchange students had come on over, this was years ago, to East Hampton, New York. And they were talking about how it is that their school is so much more disciplined in what they learn. We're not teaching our kids good stuff. This is nothing new. You think that the reason why Terry McAuliffe didn't win last night is because CRT in schools? No, that's part of it. People are tired of COVID. People are starting to wake up and realizing, like everything else that the media does, they lie. They don't want it anymore. They look at Ron DeSantis. You know, Ron DeSantis here in Florida didn't put any draconian mandates in. You don't have to have a card in order to be able to go to dinner. You don't have to have a vaccine in order to be able to participate in society. We had a little bump, a little uptick here, and you know what? It's gone. Now we're down at the lowest of the pile. The mandates, the masks, the vaccines, they just don't work. And it's a Democrat battle cry. Get the jab or else you're killing somebody else. People are tired of being called a horrible, horrible person because you don't have a vaccine. People are tired of having their children pushed around. People are tired about losing their jobs because of the COVID scaredemic, scamdemic, plandemic. But the media doesn't want to tell you that, so I'm going to tell you that. Now, my favorite video of all is from the woman who slept her way to the top, Kamala Harris, the Obama appointee to the Biden administration, because that's really what she was. Listen to what this brainless, won't say it, this brainless Democrat had to say just a little while ago.
Because you see, what happens in Virginia will in large part determine what happens in 2022, 2024, and on.
Bingo. It is the single smartest thing that that woman has ever said in her dreadful life. What happened in Virginia and what will probably happen in New Jersey, hopefully happen in New Jersey by the time they finish that whole counting, is that the Biden administration is going to come to a crashing halt. Because let me just give you this final analysis before we bring in the doctor. We're going to have Dr. Henry Risch, who is an epidemiologist from Yale University. And he is going to tell you about the dangers of vaccinating our children. But let me tell you on what is going to happen now. There is not a Democrat in Washington, D.C., with the exception of people like AOC and Nancy Pelosi, who are just totally brain dead. There is not a Democrat who is up for election in 2022 that is going to continue with this radical messaging that has been coming out of this White House. Not a single person with a brain is going to try to continue this, because if they do, they will get pummeled. And even for them, I still think it's too late. They're going to get pummeled. For as long as the GOP keeps their brain intact, gets those lawyers out like I said they should, have people all over the place to make sure that the cheating can't happen, we will take back not only the Senate, but we will take back the House. And then we'll show the Democrats what an impeachment really looks like, because we will impeach Joe Biden for what he did in Afghanistan. We will impeach Joe Biden for what he's done at the border. You know, I didn't talk much about the border here. You don't think that the border has something to do with why it is that Terry McAuliffe didn't get there? Do you know Virginia's getting inundated with all these people coming in from the border? They don't talk about that on the mainstream media. All these people coming in, where do you think they're going? Virginia is one of the places where they get inundated with illegal aliens and they get inundated with the refugees. You think these people in Virginia want that? No, they don't. And it's not because they're racists. It's because they don't want the third world culture in their state. They don't want the freaking Muslim crazy culture in their state. Doesn't make you a racist. It makes you filled with common sense. With that being said, we're going to play a clip here. I want to introduce to you via video of Fox News, Dr. Henry Rich from Yale University. I'm going to play the first 40 seconds of this clip where Mark Levin asks the doctor about what's happening with the jab and kids.
Then the CDC director comes out, and not only that, they're still going to have to wear masks. You hear Dr. Falchi. You know, people have played the endless contradictions coming out of his mouth and the endless television and other media appearances he has. This has to be one of the worst year and a half, 2-year periods of information provided to the American people by the so-called scientific and medical community that I can ever remember.
Well, as far as I can tell, that it's a top-down structure, and most doctors do not get their information by going back and reading the original studies and making up their own minds. They get fed the information from pharma reps or from what they're told from societies, and the conflicts are legion, and so it's no surprise that most doctors don't pay attention and think what they're told.
So, doctor, I have a couple of questions here for you. It was just announced yesterday that now the Pfizer drug for COVID-19 for 5-year-olds to 11-year-olds now has approval. And I'm wondering why it is that we need to be jabbing these children for something that has not caused any death. In fact, from the last report I read out of Johns Hopkins, they couldn't come up with more than a single death from COVID-19 in any child that did not have an existing underlying condition or severe obesity. What's your take on this?
I agree with you. You summarized it exactly correctly. And even this is not to denigrate that there are children who have these conditions, who have obesity or diabetes, or may have survived cancer or, organ transplant. There are some that are like that. And I'm not saying they need to be vaccinated. I'm saying they at least should have the opportunity to discuss whether there might be a benefit in vaccinating or not. But for other normal, healthy children, there is no reason for them to be vaccinated. There is none. We have no empirical evidence that there's benefit. We have empirical evidence that there's risk of harm. We've seen the issues of myocarditis and pericarditis, which is an inflammation of the sac around the heart, not just the heart muscle. In young adults, it applies to children, especially male children. And we've also seen that it's at least 4 times as likely as the numbers that we've been given through the VAERS data that the FDA and CDC have referenced. And those numbers are almost certainly underreported. And as I said, it's at least 4 times as large as those numbers from a study that was published recently.
So, doctor, let me ask you a question, because I've had many doctors on before, all very big name doctors, very credible like yourself, all from large institutions or, amazing hospital systems. And I've always failed to ask one question, so you're going to be the first one. When we talk about the sac around the heart being inflamed, what are the long-term and short-term effects of that sort of thing happening to a young child? I mean, because we hear about how it will go away. Does it really ever go away, or does it cause some kind of permanent damage?
I can't really speak to the pericarditis. I can say more about myocarditis, the inflammation of the heart muscle itself. That does not completely go away. It causes scar tissue in the muscle. And it can be a variable degree. It can be more extensive or less extensive, but it causes that. And we haven't really tried to investigate it very much to see more than just whether people who've had myocarditis lose their symptoms and go back to normal life, or whether they really have some reduction in exercise capacity, and how general this is. And we know that people who've had clinical myocarditis later in life have heart problems. I'm more likely to have heart problems, including the need for a heart transplant and chronic heart disease 15, 20 years later. So this is not by any means anything to be taken lightly. And it is not, oh, you're better, you can leave the hospital, it's all done, you're finished with it. That is not true. It's a long-term, potential long-term problem, needs to be recognized.
Doctor, I'm going to be a little tongue-in-cheek here. I didn't go to college. In fact, I tried 4 times. I dropped out every single time. I figured out I was a better entrepreneur than I was a student of the book. And I graduated towards the bottom of my high school class because I was so infatuated with my girlfriend. I wanted to spend time with her instead of math class or science. At the same time as I am a PhD in common sense, or at least I'd like to think I am, and my audience does as well. So I'm going to ask you a question from the College of Common Sense. If we have a child who has the opportunity to have the problem with the heart, as you just explained, if I have somebody from the FDA or the CDC or Pfizer sitting in front of me, and that person hears what you just said, can you please confirm or push back on me when I say, why and how does it make any sense that I'm going to put a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 17-year-old in harm's way when it comes to the heart, arguably the most important organ in the human body? Why am I going to put that muscle at risk, that organ at risk, for the sake of a shot for something that has not hurt children? Is there an answer that I don't understand, that we don't have in the College of Common Sense, that you guys get in those big, huge places like Yale and Oxford and all the other, Harvard and all the other different places that we hear about?
So they're going to say COVID does the same thing, and therefore you have to protect them against COVID even if they're not dying from COVID. And it's not true that COVID does the same thing, because people generate a much larger set of antibodies against the infection itself than against the antigen that's made by the vaccines. That the antigens for the vaccines are just the spike protein of the virus, and it makes antibodies to that part. But natural infection makes antibodies to the whole virus. It's much stronger, and it produces a much stronger and longer lasting immunity by natural infection. And it does not produce the degree of myocarditis, as far as we know, compared to the vaccination. And so I think that we've seen a much larger, 5 to 11-year-olds haven't been vaccinated yet, and we're seeing no epidemic of myocarditis, in spite of the fact that probably the majority, if not a large majority, of children in that age range have had COVID. A lot of it is asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic. Young kids who get COVID, they get headache, tiredness, maybe fever. They lie down for a day or two, and then they're back up, and that's it. And you'll contrast that to adults, where it's a much more serious problem. For children, it's very much more self-limited, because they have, number one, they have natural immunity, and number two, they don't have anywhere near the number of receptors to let the virus grow as fast as it does in adults.
Well, then, Doctor, I have to ask you the same question that Mark Levin on Fox News asked you. What's driving this? Because in my 52 years, I have never seen such stupidity in my life. I mean, every single American, I believe, gets up to go to work and comes home every single day, for the most part, to give their children more than what they had. I mean, that's the sort of life's passage, right? You pass on to your children more than what was passed on to you. And so for the first time ever, I feel as if this country, maybe it's the bureaucrats, maybe it's the White House, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the ultimate desire to have a bigger stock price at Pfizer, Moderna, what have you. Who is and what is driving this crazy messaging that these children need to get the jab?
Well, we don't know where the nefariousness is coming from. We can only speculate, and it sounds like conspiracy theories, and I'm not a conspiracist, so it's hard to understand completely. But we know who has been making public messages. We know the regulatory capture of pharma companies into the FDA. We know the CDC has put out one flagrant, outrageous so-called study after another, published in its MMWR, Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report, which is an in-house journal and not peer-reviewed, not externally peer-reviewed. And they've kept doing this, debunked and debunkable studies that the CDC is putting out. We don't know whose allegiance they have, but we do know that the large foundations and pharma companies have control over the FDA. After all, the FDA runs on a $6 billion a year budget, and 60% of that is paid by drug companies. So the FDA refers to those drug companies as its customers. It doesn't refer to the American public as its customers. It refers to those drug companies. So we know it's been what's called regulatory capture, that it's doing the bidding of those companies and just giving plausibility to its decisions by making it look like it's doing objective science when it's not. It does have some demands that the drug companies do things to make it look like they're being reviewed. But in the end, and we've seen this, we've seen FDA decisions that, number one, were totally reversed by the head of the FDA. We've seen conflicted advisory panels, the NIH panels that provide guidance to the FDA that are larded with people with pharma company conflicts of interest. 18 out of 54 in the remdesivir panel. 11 out of 20 had pharma conflicts of interest in the hydroxychloroquine panel. So these kinds of behaviors tell you that there are other interests besides the objective review and the protection of society by these organizations.
How many years have you been studying medicine and practicing medicine?
I don't practice. I'm a medical scientist. After medical school, I went and got a PhD in mathematical models of infectious epidemics. And I published on that, but I've been a professor for 40 years.
My apologies on the practice. So 40 years. In 40 years, have you ever seen something so crazy as what's going on right now?
Well, the craziness of our society has not been in just the last couple of years. It's been since, to be non-political about it, we've been suffering from attempted Marxist revolution of our society for quite a long time. And it's been, quiet, and now we see it in lots of different areas. And I think this is part and parcel of the whole thing, that there is an apparent attempt at control of the society in various ways, and it's come out by people who have virtually unlimited resources, either for political or for financial economic control of the society. And that's what we've seen. And I think Americans are finally beginning to wake up. For example, the election for governor last night in Virginia is showing that there's pushback, that people don't like where the country has been going in various respects, and they're not taking the status quo anymore. And I'm not political. I'm not saying which party is the one that is at issue. I'm just saying that when there's a change in something like that, then one sees that there's discontent.
It's funny you say that. We just spent the majority part of the show here talking about that election last night. And it's funny when you go to the media and you listen to the media response, especially from the stations I don't usually listen to, they are blaming everything you could possibly imagine about why it is that election turned out the way it was, but nobody is mentioning COVID. It's almost like as if they want to continue with this narrative that everybody's cool with these forced mandates and that we're going to be jabbing our kids. And it's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a continuation of this very false narrative. I want to switch gears here for a second, because I think there are two other things that my audience needs to hear from you that my producer had written in some notes about where you're standing and how you're teaching on certain things. One of the things she put down, it says that those who are vaccinated actually present a greater danger in some cases than those who are unvaccinated. Can you explain that?
Well, right now we don't know that it's greater, but we do know that it is. That, in other words, that vaccinated people can still get infected with the virus, that the vaccines over time have lost efficacy. Everybody knows this. There would be no consideration of booster if that weren't the case. That we were sold an original acceptability of even thinking about vaccination, that it was going to be twice and done, so to speak. And, the goalpost got moved, just like Dr. Fauci moved the goalpost on what percentage of the population would need to be immune in order to have immunity, population immunity. And so those goalposts have been moved because the vaccines fade. They lose their efficacy over some months. And so we know that people who get vaccinated can still get infected, transmit the infection, have levels of virus in their nose that are comparable, if not much higher, than people who are unvaccinated and get the infection. But we also know that people who have had COVID are as or much more likely more immune than people who are vaccinated, are much less likely to get a second independent case of COVID. And that's crucial, actually, because that's what's going to solve this problem.
Well, okay, what solves this problem? What solves the problem? Because I had a statement here that you said that the vaccinated have a greater, and maybe I'm misquoting here, it says that people, that the vaccinated people are the ones who generate the new strains, not the unvaccinated.
They're more likely to.
Okay.
It can go either way, but they're more likely to because the vaccinations, to the degree that they're still working, suppress the strains that they were calibrated against to work against. And what that means is if a virus mutates, and in fact, this virus mutates so much that every infected person makes thousands of mutants, thousands of different mutants. But most of those don't get out. Most of those are self-limited because they're not any better than the original strain at infecting other people. But what happens is if you have a vaccine that creates immunity that suppresses the original strain and some of those mutant strains that are not that different than the original strain, then what's left is the ones that are unaffected by the vaccine. Those are the ones that are able to multiply in the person better because they're less affected by the vaccine. And because they're able to multiply in the person better, there's more of it and they're able to get out. And if that happens, that generates a new mutant strain in the population. And so this is all empirical. All we can do is watch and wait and watch and see what happens. We know that there have been mutants on the Delta strain, but how different and how important that is has not been determined yet. So it's not, I don't think, these are theoretical arguments. I'm an epidemiologist because give me the human data. I like the theory, but I'm still going to wait to see what the human data show. And so we really have to wait to see how new strains are occurring. So far, we haven't seen any major new strain take over any population, and it's just still been the Delta. We're slowly winding down from Delta. I'm optimistic that it's going to go away. We're into the fall and winter months. People are probably now beginning to spend more time indoors, and we have to see how much the epidemic is going to go down over the next few months. But I'm optimistic that this will continue.
One of the things also that I had here as a note was that you're heavy into the idea of early treatment, and you had done something where 150,000 people were treated and you only went through 24 deaths. Can you explain that?
So it's kind of an open secret that there are doctors across the country that have been treating COVID early and have been using any of a number of drugs in recipes for how to do that. They use hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, budesonide, which is an inhaled steroid, or prednisone, which is an oral steroid, maybe aspirin or other anticoagulants. There's other medications as well, all part of these recipes that are tailored for each patient as doctors practice the art and science of medicine for each patient. This has been done in large degree by telemedicine groups that have been set up over the last year and a half in the U.S., plus large clinical groups, doctor treatment groups that have treated thousands of patients over time, day in, day out, that they see hundreds of patients a day in their groups and have been treating them. And so when I queried this sort of unofficially by calling them or emailing them, asking what their experience has been, and tallied up all of the numbers that they sent to me, it's been over 150,000 people that they've treated this way. Not all of them have been high risk. So, it's kind of anyone's guess. I would guess that probably 30 to 40% of the patients they treated were high risk. But in any event, they've treated 150,000 patients, and fewer than 24, as best I understand it, have died from COVID. And this is a stellar record that shows that these drugs work when you treat patients early who recognize that this is how you have to manage this illness, and this is what should have been done. This is what gives natural immunity in the population. People who have survived COVID have much better immunity. It's at least as long-lasting, if not definitely much longer lasting. We have evidence that it's longer lasting than the vaccine immunity. And this is what's going to, and this immunity is not just for narrowly the strains that are in the vaccine, but it extends much wider to other strains, mutant strains, that will protect the population. And this is why I say that natural immunity is what's going to get us out of the pandemic. We may never get out of the low level of these viruses, the coronaviruses circulating in the population, but by and large, people are going to be immune to it because, in fact, the majority of people who've had COVID have been asymptomatic. It's only about a quarter or 20% who've been symptomatic with COVID. And so we already know that in the U.S., some 50 to 70% of the population has already had COVID. And that's crucial because before the Delta wave, it was about 30%. And that's why the Delta wave is as big a wave as it is. Now that it's 50 to 70%, any new strain that comes along is going to have a harder time making its way into the population because there's more immunity. Once we get to 75 to 80%, it'll be even bigger. That's why I say it'll be bumps instead of waves. And that's what we have to achieve, is greater natural immunity. And in fact, vaccinating young children does exactly the opposite of what we need, because instead of giving them natural immunity that will fend off other strains, the mutant strains that develop in the future, they are going to be much more narrowly limited and for a shorter period of time to the strains that they were vaccinated against. And you can understand it's now a year and a half late. Would you give a year and a half old flu vaccine to somebody? Why are we giving year and a half old, COVID vaccines that are very limited in their range of viruses that they're effective against? So it's counterproductive to vaccinate children, not just for the children themselves, but for the population as a whole.
See, now you sound like you come from the College of Common Sense, because that right there, that statement right there, why would we give something to somebody, especially a child, when we know what the risks are, that is, a year and a half aged? And that's where, to me, you said the thing about conspiracy theories. I've lost audience before because I tell them, will you stop with the stuff about Q and all these other different things? I can't stand the conspiracy theory things. I think it hurts. It hurts the conversation. With that being said, there's no other, it is almost impossible. It is impossible to have a conversation without coming up and saying, what the hell is driving this? Because what you just said there is common sense. Any person, whether you have a PhD or you didn't even spend a day in school, that makes common sense. It's like buying somebody, it's like going to Best Buy and shopping for a black and white television. Why would you do that? So it doesn't make sense to me. And there's got to be something driving it more than that. I hate to think that it's the stock price, because these drug companies are already making a ton of money. How much money do they need? Or is it more about control? I don't know what the answer is. I have two things for you left, and I'll let you jump. First of all, you talked about what it is that you think gets us out of this. First question is, how long until you think that day arrives? And number two is, you're at Yale. And everything I've heard you say here today is like, grounds for censorship, and you're not being censored yet. What's the difference between you and some of these other great professors and doctors that I've talked to, and they've been, body slammed by the institutions that they're working with or aligned with, simply because they're not going with the narrative coming out of the CDC?
Well, I'll speak to the second point, which is that Yale does have a tradition of freedom of intellectual inquiry and freedom of academic thought. And this was embodied in the Woodward Report in 1974 that dealt with freedom of academic speech. It was firmly enshrined then. My dean, early last year, has basically said that I have the freedom to express my intellectual academic understandings of things, even if they're controversial. And just like I do, my colleagues who think that I don't know anything, and have said so, they have the right to say what they think is the case. And we have the right to disagree. And it's what makes Yale the great institution that it is, and why I've loved being a faculty member at Yale. It's rough and tumble, and that's the way academic life should be. And let the ideas win, and not the censorship.
What about on social media? Have you been pummeled on social media?
Well, as it happens, I have no social media accounts.
Oh, so you are the
just don't do
smartest
social
guy. You are the smartest man in the world. There you go. There you go. What about in terms of the other question, Doctor? When do you see when this comes to a finale, if it does?
Well, as I said, I think that there will always be low-level endemic COVID in populations around the world. And I think that, I'm hoping that it'll be very low level. We're seeing it begin to taper off here, the Delta wave. It's not going down as fast as I would like, but it is going down. And so I think the reason it's not going down is because the vaccines are losing efficacy. And I think for people who've been multi-vaccinated, that the boosters, if they're willing to take the risk of subsequent boosters, will help for them. But I think that we need to have more population immunity. We don't even know yet whether breakthrough infections that are the infections that people get after they've been vaccinated, whether they give as much a natural immunity as people who have not been vaccinated who get infected, because the vaccines themselves, we're beginning to learn, suppress some efficacy of the immune system more generally. And so we don't know if these breakthrough infections will make as much of a widespread immune response and general immunity. And this is, again, we just have to watch and see going forward. But for the moment, it looks like they do. And that as we get more people who've had COVID successfully, it will help to drive down the numbers and make it a much smaller problem than it has been.
Last question. I got about 30 seconds left, so try to make it as quick as you can. If you had a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old that was in school, let's say, for instance, in Los Angeles, where they're mandating the fact that you can't go to school unless you get the shot, would you send your kid to school? I mean, would you send your kid to get the shot so this way they could go to school, or would you suggest would you do otherwise?
Well, as I said on the Mark Levin program, that if the child's got comorbidities, chronic conditions, then it's something to discuss. If not, I would remove if it were my child, I would remove the child from school and homeschool. Homeschooling is not as intimidating as it sounds. There's lots of resources on the internet. I would band together with other parents to do it jointly and spread the effort, which is possible. I know parents who've done homeschooling and it's very successful. So the vaccines are not going to kill all these kids. It may damage some, and it's just not worth the risk compared to the benefit of not getting vaccinated. And so that's how I would manage it for myself.
Doctor, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your hard work, and I appreciate you being tall and bold and saying what needs to be said.
Thanks very much. Great to be with you.
All right. Stay well. All right. Well, you heard the doctor say it. If your kid is going to be subjected to the jab, you better think twice about it. You better really, really talk to everybody you need to talk to, study everything you need to study, and really think twice about sticking that jab into your young kid's arm. I mean, ultimately, it's your child, and it will be your family's decision. But, man, you need to be educated more than just what you're hearing on the mainstream media. And so with that being said, that's it from me. God willing, we'll be with you again tomorrow. Don't forget to visit DMLCBD.com. I've told you this plenty of times. Because of Joe Biden and what's happening in the country, at least in part, it's a nasty, nasty place for most people who have products that they have to ship. We are one of those people. So if you're looking low on your DML CBD, you may want to get in there now as our inventory starts to take a hammering itself. That's DMLCBD.com. Also, for Team DML and TeamDML.com members, you can see we're doing the video now. If you're somebody who's just listening to the audio program, you may want to go in there to TeamDML.com and sign up as a member. You get to watch this program versus just listening to it. You get to see all the videos that I'm referring to, and we're going to be very video heavy as we continue into 2022. And don't forget, it's a year from now, but the midterm elections, man, they're going to be up on us right away. And with that being said, I think it would be apropos and a good thing to end this program with my favorite video of the entire year.
Because you see, what happens in Virginia will in large part determine what happens in 2022, 2024, and on.
You say it, sister. You say it, sister. May God bless you, our troops, your family, these United States, and Kamala Harris for finally getting it right.
This podcast is produced by Anita Griffey, Lori McLean, and yours truly. And you could subscribe by going to the Apple Podcasts page and search for Dennis Michael Lynch Podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Or you can download the DML News app from the Google Play Store for Android phones and the Apple App Store for iPhones. And do not forget to visit our sponsor, DMLCBD.com, so this way you can feel great again.